Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes, Halloween edition.
Oh, hopefully you guys just heard some fun Halloween sound effects for our intro. Hopefully we were able to get those figured out.
Yeah, if we didn't, just insert that sound right here in your brain, but hopefully you'll hear a sound here.
Isn't that fun? We're getting so fancy with our editing.
I know, we're getting so good.
So we decided to do another little spooky episode for you guys, a couple more hauntings, but some more famous haunted places, so maybe something that will pique your interest a little bit. And I feel like we've already had a couple of spooky occurrences this morning, so...
Yeah, so you guys have heard me talk non-stop about my new apartment and how I'm moving and I can't wait and blah, 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 blah. I know you're sick of it, but don't worry, I'm in the new apartment now. And so we're sitting here getting ready to record, and all of a sudden there's just this hollow knocking noise.
Yes.
And I don't know where it came from, but I'm currently locked in the guest room, and I'm just gonna stay locked in it for now.
I could hear the sound, and I was like, what is that? And Courtney was like, is that someone knocking, on our door? And I'm like, that's a really hollow sound for someone to be, knocking on your front door.
Yeah. So I don't know what that was, so hopefully you hear this episode and I don't get murdered between now and editing.
I mean, that would be, a really dedicated Halloween episode, guys.
And that's how dedicated I am to you guys.
Yeah, so we had that little spirit come to visit us from today's episode, and then we already recorded this intro once, and my computer just completely froze, so it just stopped recording, everything stopped working, I pushed a bunch of buttons, and then nothing happened, and then everything went black, and then I had to turn my computer back on. So also, again, hopefully you guys hear this episode, and nobody gets murdered, and we're able to record everything, and all the good things.
Yeah, and if you hear any background noises on my end, it's the spooky spirit and not my cat rummaging around.
Totally.
She's not getting used to the move too well, so if you hear just a little drop, a little crack, it's the ghost. It's the ghost.
Yes, it's totally the ghost. And it's also raining here. It's not too loud currently, so hopefully it won't be too bad. I know one time we did a haunted house episode where it was pouring down rain here, and you can actually hear it in the background of the episode. So, just all kinds of little spooky spook for you guys today.
Yeah, so hopefully now we can start with our spooky stories, and hopefully you'll get definitely in the Halloween mood. So we all know the famous phrases of the "Here's Johnny" and the "Red Rum," and we can all probably, as I'm saying this, picture just the blood rushing down the hallway, or those little creepy twin girls holding hands, in the hallway. So we all know that. We all know The Shining. But do we know the real story of the hotel that inspired Stephen King to write The Shining?
Do we?
Well, if you don't, I'm going to tell you.
You will after this episode.
You will soon. Stay tuned. So my references were a Britannica article, the Stanley Hotel website, ABC Action News article, a Vice article, the CDC website. So those are my references. Hopefully I've included everything. So, Freeland Oscar Stanley was born in 1849, and he was an American inventor with his twin brother, Francis Edgar Stanley. So, they were most famously known for the invention of the steam-driven automobile, which was apparently a real popular thing back then, not so much anymore. So, they had a company called Stanley Motor Company, and they continued building these cars until 1920. And I was reading too, these cars, for a while held, the fastest, they would outbeat the other automobiles that, weren't steam driven. They were really fast, apparently.
That's really cool.
So, in 1903, at the age of 54, Freeland got a very bad case of tuberculosis. So, back in 1903, they didn't really have antibiotics. So, they were like, okay, the best cure for tuberculosis is just go get some fresh, dry air, have a lot of sunshine, and a hearty diet.
Sounds like a good cure to me.
And that's all we can do. It's all we can do for you at the moment. So then, I did a little deep dive on tuberculosis, guys. It's just a little tiny one. So, tuberculosis had been around since, ancient Greece. There's, writings and stuff of ancient Greeks having tuberculosis, basically. But there's like no treatment for it. So in the 1940s, antibiotics did come along. So before that, they were like, just stay warm, just rest, and just have some really good food. And in the early 1800s, cod liver oil, vinegar massages, and inhaling hemlock or turpentine were all treatments used for tuberculosis.
Isn't turpentine like a paint chemical?
I thought so too. And I was like, I feel like if you're having trouble breathing, like inhaling anything is probably not going to help.
That sounds a little counterintuitive there.
Yeah. So 1940s do come along and there are antibiotics, so that helps. But overall, before that, it just seemed like some good rest, warm sunshine, and some good food was just the best thing you could do. And if nothing else, then you'll probably live the rest of your life pretty happy because you're just resting in the sunshine with food. So,
I mean, that's all I ever want, you know?
Yeah. So in these days, a lot of people with tuberculosis moved to Rocky Mountain, Colorado, because I guess it was just a very warm area, had that dry air. And so Freeland and his wife Flora visited Estes Park, Colorado, which is about an hour and a half from Denver. So after spending the summer there, Freeland was really starting to feel better, and he's like, that's it, I'm going to purchase some land. Just like rich men do. Always purchasing that land. So Freeland and Flora were really used to just like high society on the East Coast. I mean, they were rich, they were inventors, all this. And so they decided to build their home in Estes Park up to the highest standards, because Estes Park was just basically nothing. It didn't really have any society. It was just kind of there. It was just kind of like a mountain town. And Freeland did end up helping build Estes Park tremendously. And so by 1917, it was an official municipality with waterworks, a power plant, and civic organizations. So when he came in, he gave this town a major glow up.
Mm-hmm. And that town is absolutely beautiful now if you guys have never been. It's amazing.
Yeah. I haven't been, but I want to go. And I want to go to the Stanley Hotel. Anyway.
That was on our list, and then I don't know what happened. We just never made it there, so.
I'm sure there's a lot to do around.
Yeah.
So, Freeland and Flora built their home, like I said, to the highest standards. And it was officially, like, ready in 1909. So, they invited a bunch of people, and guests were absolutely shocked when they pulled up. So, in this house, there were electric lights.
Oh.
Telephones.
Wow.
En-suite bathrooms. En-suite bathrooms, y'all.
Pretty fancy.
A staff of uniformed servants, and a fleet of automobiles at their service.
Wow.
So if you came and stayed with them and you were like, I really want to run into town and get, I don't know, something, they were like, here, just borrow the car.
I mean, there's some pretty good hotel amenities. I enjoy that.
Yeah. So it had 100 rooms. And then a 2/3 scaled down second lounge was finished a year later. And this is all at the moment just for their house.
Wow.
So they're like, hi, we're bougie, what's up? And the top floor of their house was dedicated solely to just children and their nannies, basically.
They're like, we don't want to see y'all, just stay up there.
And it was an invite-only gathering place for their friends, so you couldn't just, like, show up. And Harry Houdini even performed at their home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I also saw, there was, like, a list of, like, pretty famous people who came just to visit their home.
That's really cool.
So in 1930, I guess Freeland was like, I'm a little old, it's a little too much. So he sold his home and the buildings to a corporation who transformed the property into a hotel. And so the national park that we know today wasn't as like big as it is now. It was still growing, so their success was really minimal. And after like a few attempts at a revival, the property was sold to John Cullen in the 1990s. I'm sure this property is doing amazing right now after everything, but
yes.
And Freeland did die at the age of 91 in 1940, so I guess all that fresh air and sunshine kind of worked, because he did end up living pretty long.
Nice long life.
So Freeland's spirits are said to haunt the Stanley Hotel. Specifically, his spirit is spotted in the billiard room and the bar. Two pretty good places to hang out. And Stanley's wife, Flora, has also been spotted in the hotel, and she's known to, like, tap on the piano keys. So people will just be hanging out and no one will be near the piano and it'll just start playing. And they're like, what's up?
All of the ghost stories we've done, ghosts seem to really like music for some reason.
Yeah, they're like, party, party.
Yeah, right?
So another ghost that is said to roam the Stanley is the former housekeeper, Elizabeth Wilson, or sometimes she was referred to as Mrs. Wilson. And so tour guides do say she was lighting some lanterns in room 217 when she was seriously injured in an explosion. So she did survive, and she did pass away a few years later. But they say Miss Wilson is now a regular in room 217, and guests will report items being like moved, luggage being packed up, lights going on and off. And it also seems that she's a little old-fashioned and conservative and really does not like unmarried couples.
Oh.
So people who aren't married report feeling a cold presence between them in bed.
She's like, we're not having this in on my watch.
Like, out. She's like, kids these days, what are they doing?
Right. The horror. I said horror, not horror, by the way. We'll just cut that out.
There's some horrors in this house. Oh, man. Okay. So there's also the report of a little boy named Billy. And I just want to ask, why are all the kid ghosts named Billy?
That is interesting.
They're all Billies. Maybe it's
Yeah.
just because William was such a common name back then. So, like,
Yeah.
every kid was called Billy. But I'm like, every little boy ghost is Billy. And so they say Billy does have autism. And he also roams the grounds. And he really likes to play with the hair of guests. So people will feel like their hair being touched.
Mm-hmm.
And he seems to be really drawn to people who work with autism or are familiar with the developmental disorder.
Oh, wow.
So he just kind of feels like drawn to them.
Mm-hmm.
And on the 4th floor, guests also report hearing the sound of children playing, like running around, laughing. And this was the floor where all the children and their nannies were sent off to hide. And there's also a pet cemetery on the property.
Nope. I've seen that movie. Nope.
Not gonna do that. Actually, this pet cemetery inspired Stephen King's Pet Semetary.
Very nice.
So, guests have been known to see the ghost of a cat and a dog walking around, which that's my kind of ghost, honestly.
Yes.
Like, I want to see a ghost cat, please. And there's also a cave system below the hotel that has a higher than average concentration of limestone and quartz, which some people believe like draws spirits in. So they think that can be why there's more like ghosts there.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, this hotel is the inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining. So basically what happened, it was like 1970 something. I'm sorry guys, I forgot to write down the year. It was the early 1970s. And so Stephen King and his wife were living in Boulder. He was writing The Stand. And him and his wife were like, we just need a weekend off. Like we need a weekend away from our kids. We just need a reset.
Mm-hmm.
And so they ended up driving and they drove up to the Stanley Hotel. So it was the last day of their season and no one was coming in. So it is like The Shining where the Stanley Hotel would close down for the winter. They'd completely close, all that. And so Stephen King was like, can I check in? Can we stay? And they were like, only if you have cash. We've already sent the credit receipts back to Denver. So that's how like old-fashioned it was.
Wow.
So Stephen King did end up having the money, the cash, so he did it. And they were the only ones in the hotel. Like the wind is whistling outside. All the rooms are empty. And there's 155 rooms in this hotel. And it was about to be completely closed for the winter, which is just terrifying in itself.
Super spooky.
So it is reported that he stayed in room 217, which is where Mrs. Wilson likes to haunt. And he ended up having this lucid dream that his young son was being chased around the hotel and he was being chased by a fire hose and all this. And he woke up and at that point he was like, I know what I'm going to base my book on. Like it just came to him at that moment. And I thought that the Stanley was a little bit more haunted than it was. Like, I thought there was, like, some crazy stuff going on. And apparently at the Stanley Hotel, it does have that hedge maze, like The Shining does. Like, that's there, too. So Stephen King was just really inspired of the idea of this hotel shutting down and the lucid dream he had. And so at that point, he wrote the book The Shining. And The Shining with Jack Nicholson was not filmed at the Stanley Hotel, but there was a TV miniseries in 1997 that Stephen King wrote that was filmed here.
Oh, wow.
Which I didn't know existed, and now I'm going to have to hunt it down and watch it. So, and today there's multiple ghost tours and packages offered at the Stanley Hotel because Stephen King recently wrote a sequel to The Shining, and so now they have like a Dr. Sleep package that you can stay, and so you can stay and have a package, or you can just have a tour, like all that stuff. So that is the Stanley Hotel. I thought it was way more haunted. Originally, our plan was to have just an episode on the Stanley Hotel. I thought that would have enough information. It didn't. So that is what I have on the Stanley Hotel, the inspiration for The Shining and Pet Sematary.
Which I think is still super interesting because, I mean, even though there aren't all of these actual reported hauntings, you know, there's something in that hotel that, you know, inspired him to write these, like, incredible novels that are just so, like, well-known today and just so celebrated, and, you know, everyone knows The Shining and Pet Sematary, you know?
Yeah, and that's what we want to do, too, is, like, these famous Halloween movies. Like, where did the inspiration come from? And yeah, so the next one we have is a real good one.
Oh, it's a good one. There's a lot to this one. So, the city of Amityville is on Long Island, about 30 miles outside of New York City, and a house there became so famous that it launched a book and movie franchise. I'm sure you all know what we're talking about. So for this section, we got our information from a Writer's Digest article, a Seattle Times article, biography.com, allthat'sinteresting.com, and the truth about Amityville.amityvillenow.com, which is a mouthful. But so the DeFeo family originally lived in this house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville. So they were very comfortable financially, but it was not a very happy home. The father, Ronald Sr., was very domineering and abusive, and his wife, Louise, was just more kind of submissive, and she just kind of didn't really seem to have a whole lot of personality. She just kind of faded into the background because her husband was so overbearing. So they had 5 children: Ronald Jr., Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew. So Ronald Jr. was a piece of work. So he began getting into a lot of trouble as a kid. He started relying on drugs and alcohol to cope. He started lashing out very physically against his parents. He even threatened his father with a gun one time. So they tried sending him to a psychiatrist, but Ronald was just adamant that he didn't need any help. So his parents decided to try another tactic, and they're like, well, we'll just give him a weekly stipend and gifts. So, you know, that makes sense, right? No?
That's the best parenting. Instead of dealing with it, just, here's a gift. Here's some money.
Yeah, we'll just give, like, I think one of them was, like, the super expensive, like, speedboat and, like, all that stuff.
That's a big gift. I was thinking, like, here's a new book, honey.
Oh, no, like, it's very, like, you get anything you want. So that seemed to appease him for a while, but he was heavily using LSD and heroin by age 17, and so he was kicked out of school for his violent outbursts. And so one time, he even attempted to shoot his father during an argument, but the gun jammed. So this isn't even, like, threatening him with a gun. This is, like, he actively tried to shoot him, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
So, but after that, when he was 18, Ronald Jr. was working at the family auto dealership, but he didn't really, like, show up all the time. Like, he just had to be there sometimes, and his father would pay him the same weekly stipend every week, whether or not he actually worked. So why would he work, you know?
Yeah, for real. Like, if I got paid the same amount to either be there and do my job or not be there and do my job, I almost would be like, peace out.
Yeah, exactly. So on November 13th, 1974, no one really thought anything of it when Ronald left work at noon because he was bored, you know, like you do. And so he met up with some friends at the bar, and he kept calling his house, and, like, no one was answering, and he was, like, complaining about this a lot and making it very well known, like, I keep calling my house, and, like, no one's answering the phone, I can't get a hold of anyone. So later that evening at around 6:30 p.m., Ronald re-entered the bar, and he yelled, "You've got to help me, I think my mother and father are shot." So some of the patrons at the bar followed him back to the house, where they found just the most gruesome scene. So the bodies of all 6 of his family members were found in their beds, positioned on their stomachs. They appeared to have been shot with a high-powered rifle, and the investigation would determine that it happened sometime around 3:15 a.m. The parents had both been shot twice, and all of the children had been killed with single gunshots. So his sister Dawn was 18, Allison was 13, Mark was 12, and John Matthew was 9. And evidence showed that Louise and Allison were both awake at the time of their death. So police were a bit suspicious due to the fact that there was no sign of a struggle or any evidence that they were drugged. So, I mean, if some stranger just comes into your home and is murdering your entire family, you're probably going to fight back. There's going to be some evidence of a struggle.
Yeah, and especially if Louise and Allison were probably awake, but also, like, you're shooting people.
Yeah, like, it's not going to be very quiet. And there's 6 of you. So it's like, it's going to take some time to, even if it's just like this mass shooting, like, that's a lot of sound. Like, how did no one get away? It doesn't make any sense. So no neighbors who were awake reported hearing any gunshots, but they did hear the family's dog barking. And the whole family were also still wearing pajamas, which indicated that the murder had to have happened pretty early in the day before anyone had gotten up. So as police are investigating, they realized that Ronald Jr.'s alibi of being at work and the bar was pretty quickly falling apart. And he also just kept changing his story multiple times. At one point, he claimed that the mob hitman Luis Fellini killed his family and made him watch. But Fellini did have a very solid alibi that he was out of state at the time. And then DeFeo did confess to murdering his entire family. So he went to trial on October 4th, and his attorney, William Weber, proposed an insanity plea saying that his client was hearing voices that told him to kill his family. However, a psychiatrist with the prosecution testified that Ronald had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. However, he knew exactly what he was doing when he shot and killed all 6 members of his family. So a jury did convict him on 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced him to 6 concurrent sentences of 25 years to life. And Ronald DeFeo Jr. is still currently in prison, and all of his appeals and attempts at parole have been denied. So after his trial, Ronald came out with different versions of his story again. So at one point he says that his sister Dawn killed their father, and then their distraught mother just killed everyone. And in that story, Ronald only killed his mother. Okay. And in another version, he said that Dawn shot them all, and then Ronald shot Dawn. So there are some theories that there were 2 shooters in the house, but there hasn't really been any kind of evidence to point to who the second shooter might have been.
And my thing is as well, I read reports that they said Louise and Allison were both possibly awake. And I'm like, but if Dawn was a part of it, wouldn't there be evidence that she was awake?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all speculation. It's all that stuff. But I'm like, wouldn't you think that Dawn would be awake if she was shooting?
If she was involved in the shooting? I mean, do people usually shoot guns while they're asleep? I don't think so.
Yeah. Ronald was just a piece of work. Just stay in prison, sir.
Yes.
Just stay.
So that is the true horror story that happened in the Amityville house. But as I'm sure you all are aware, there is much more to come. So about 13 months after the murders, George and Kathy Lutz purchased the home for $80,000. And this is a really big home, so this was a very cheap price. And so the home even came with all of the furniture from the DeFeo family. So it was just completely as is from the time of the murder. So the Lutzes were recently married, and they wanted a new home to bring their 3 children, Daniel, Melissa, and Christopher, from their previous marriages together. Now I couldn't really find... One article made it sound like all 3 of the kids were Kathy's, but in another article, Daniel has the last name Lutz, but Christopher does not. So, it's very confusing.
Yeah. Because they didn't have any kids together. They were all from previous marriages?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any kids together. All 3 of the kids were from either Kathy's previous marriage or both Kathy and George's previous marriages.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really find any information. I don't know, it's very weird. But so the family only lived there for 28 days. So they would recount tales of hauntings that would lead to the infamous Amityville Horror book and movie franchise. So the Lutz family reported during their time there that there were strange odors and slime coming out of the walls, as well as knives flying in the kitchen and a pig-like creature with red eyes. George even reported seeing Kathy and their sons levitating above their beds. He reported waking up every morning at 3:15, which was believed to be the time that Ronald murdered his family. The family asked a priest to come and bless the house, and he allegedly heard a voice telling him to get out. And then finally, on January 14th, 1976, again only 28 days after moving into the home, the Lutz family fled to Kathy's mother's home, leaving all of their belongings behind. And they would never return to the home on Ocean Avenue again. And they had all of their possessions just sold through auction. So when they took off that day, they literally never came back.
Yeah.
Like, they had someone go in and, like, sell all of their belongings for them, which leads more to the credibility of their story when you get into it later, that you're like, that's a very odd behavior, but...
Mm-hmm.
So then, George began to seek out how to get a book published about his story. So a man named Jay Anson heard the Lutz's story, and he decided to write the Amityville Horror, which was published in September of 1977. So the book was based on 35 hours of George recording his story on tape, plus an additional 5 hours of Anson interviewing George, as well as some other locals. So the Lutzes did receive an undisclosed percentage of the profits of this book, but there were many odd happenings that were associated with the book as well. So the author, Jay Anson, actually suffered a heart attack after deciding to write the story, and he ended up writing the book during his recovery. And 2 reporters from People magazine had photographed the home and were planning on interviewing Jay Anson afterwards, but their car caught fire while sitting in the driveway at the home while they were taking pictures.
That's creepy.
Oh, it gets weirder. So, Anson also gave an early copy of the manuscript to a woman to read, and her apartment caught fire that night, killing her and her 2 children.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And supposedly, now, I mean, I don't know about this, but supposedly the only item left undamaged in the apartment was the manuscript of the book. So another man was driving home with a copy of the manuscript in his trunk when he attempted to drive through what he thought was a mud puddle, but turned out to be a 12-foot hole that just, completely immersed his car. And again, supposedly, the manuscript was the only dry item left in the car when it was fished out the next day. And finally, Anson's editor's car caught on fire when he was on the way to drop off the finished manuscript at the publisher's office. So lots of spooky happenings around this book deal.
Yeah, I'd be like, you know what? Just forget it. Just don't edit it.
Yeah,
just release it.
Never mind, it's fine. So the movie of the same name was released in July of 1979, and at the time of its release, it was the most successful independent movie in history, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But then people started having some speculations about this story. So the Lutzes did say that not all of the details in the book and the movie were accurate. They're like, look, we provided our true story, but as artists do, things were embellished, things were changed. That's not our fault. That's just part of turning it into this. Okay. But sources close to the Lutzes say that they were in debt and they wanted to use this as an opportunity to make money. And the family did have a falling out with their lawyer over financial issues, and he stated in 1979 that the 3 of them came up with a story together over a couple of bottles of wine. So apparently there's been nothing to corroborate this, which I don't really know what you would have to corroborate it if it was just a conversation between people. But apparently the lawyer stuck to his story, the Lutzes stuck to their story. Who knows?
I did see a quote, I think from the lawyer, where he was literally George sat there and was listen to these stories we came up with, and we were talking about things that could happen because it was haunted,
Yeah.
They were just trying to come up with craziness.
What could we possibly have had happen to us? But the Lutzes did stick to their story until the day they died. And they said that even though there were some errors in the retelling, that the story itself was not a hoax. And they did also pass a lie detector test when they were questioned about the validity of the stories.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But, we know that that's not foolproof or anything like that. Also, and who knows whether or not their stories are true, but if they were making them up, sometimes you tell a lie so long that you convince yourself that it's true, in which case, you would pass the lie detector test. If in your mind at that point this really happened, that's possible.
That's what I was thinking too, how I was sitting here and I heard that hollow knocking and I'm like, oh, what if it's a raccoon in the walls? It's a ghost. And then you start seeing things to make that true. Your mind can easily get away with you. And even if they had started, like, making up stories. Like, wouldn't it be crazy if, like, there was slime oozing from the walls, or you guys were levitating and, like, you have a dream about it, or, like, a lucid dream, you know? Like, it can happen. Like, you can make yourself, like, believe anything.
Yeah, 100%. So Lutz's family did claim that the spirits in the home followed them wherever they went for the rest of their lives. So they said, like, this house wasn't haunted, like, we are haunted. Like, they came with us, is what they say.
Yeah.
And here's some other interesting tidbits. So George and Kathy did divorce in the 1980s. So their son Daniel reported as an adult that he still has nightmares to this day about the house and what he experienced there. But again, he was a child. If you've been told something, false memories are a very real thing. I mean, I think we all can think of, like, you know, maybe a story that your parents have told you over and over about when you were a child, and eventually, like, you have a memory of that even though you really don't. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you were too young to remember it or whatever, but it's been told so many times that you think you remember actually being there. So that is very, very possible, especially in the case of the children.
And if you're told, like, these spirits follow us, anything bad that happens to you, you're going to be like, oh, that's the spirit. It's like, stub my toe, that's the spirit. Something fell in my closet, that's the spirits.
Exactly. So Daniel did speak out in a recent documentary about what it's been like being the Amityville horror kid his whole life, which I'm sure that's tough regardless of whether or not any of it was true.
Mm-hmm.
And he did refuse to take a lie detector test, which, you know, whatever, that doesn't really mean anything. But I guess in the documentary they suggested that some of this could be false memories, and he was, like, very upset about that and was like, no, like, I know what I experienced. But again, with false memories, like, you do have that memory. Like, it exists in your brain even though it's not real. Like, it's such a hard thing to kind of understand.
The mind is, like, a creepy thing.
Yeah, like, and I'm sure that these kids really believe, if this was completely made up by the parents, I'm sure the kids really believe that this actually happened because they've lived with these stories their whole life. You know, it's not a false memory as in you're actively telling a lie. It's like you believe that this has happened. So now Kathy's son, Christopher, and I'm assuming that it's Kathy's son just because he has a different last name, but again, I couldn't really find specific details because Daniel's last name is Lutz. So I don't know. But Christopher has been more vocal about his experiences. So he says that the story is not a hoax, but again, that not all of the details are accurate. He also says that his previous stepdad, George, dabbled in the occult and engaged in dark magic to intentionally draw out the spirits. So Christopher's story isn't that this happened to them, it's that he tried to make it happen to them. Which goes back to what we said of, if you want to believe something is there, little things that start happening you might believe are the spirits that you think are there. So he does say that they experienced paranormal activity there, and he even remembers, like, a shadow moving towards him, which, not to discount his story, but it's like, I remember being a kid and thinking that I saw a shadow moving towards me. You know, it's...
Yeah. And especially if your parents, who you trust, are like,
yes,
that was a spirit, that was a shadow, like...
Exactly. So Christopher does say that many of the events in the book and the movie were fabricated by George to sell his story and make money. And George did sue his former stepson Christopher in 2003 over allegations of trademark infringement and fraud relating to a future Amityville movie that George was planning. Which is like, okay. Which I guess he ran into some issues with the trademark because anyone can sell something about Amityville because that's a city name. Like, you don't own Amityville. Like, he tried to trademark, like, the Amityville Horror, but again, you don't own... So, and that kind of leads me to believe that maybe part of it was a hoax, because it's like, why are you so adamant about, like, I own this? Like, you lived in a house for 28 days and maybe some things happened to you, but you don't own that entire experience? I don't know.
Because I also thought I heard, like, that the house was pretty cheap, but it was still out of their price range. Like, once they got in, they were like, we can't afford this.
Yeah.
So they were, like, trying to get out. And, like, yeah, it definitely seems like they're trying to make money. For sure.
So Kathy died in 2004 and George died in 2006. So the house on Ocean Avenue has been owned by 5 different owners since the murders, and was recently purchased in February of 2017 for $605,000, which was $200,000 below the asking price, which is insane. One of the previous owners did have the address changed to 108 Ocean Avenue. I don't really know why that matters. I read something that said to, like, prevent all the people that, like, came to gawk at it or whatever, but I'm like, okay, well, it's very obvious online that it was now changed to 108, so that doesn't really do anything.
And I mean, there's pictures of the house. Like, it's not like they're like,
exactly,
it's not this. I have no idea what it is.
Oh, 112's not here. All right, they must tore it down. I'll leave. But they have changed the exterior and the interior of the house a lot, so it doesn't look like the house did at the time of the books and the movies, and it looks very different outside now. But none of the other owners of the house have reported any paranormal experiences. So 4 different owners since then. None of them have reported any paranormal experiences, but the Lutz do claim that the spirits followed them, in which case they wouldn't remain in the house because they went after them. And so the Lutzes at one point did say that they believe that Ronald did kill his family because of the spirits in the home. So that, like, he did have these spirits telling him to kill his family.
Yeah.
So that is the actual murder that happened in the Amityville Horror House, and the speculation of some possibly paranormal activity, possibly a hoax. Nobody really knows, but that's what happened.
Yeah. To me, the Lutzes seem a little full of it, personally. Yeah. But when Kevin and I went to New York last year, I really, really, really wanted to go to this house, but it was just so far off, and we weren't renting a car that it was like, there's no way we can do it. Because we were going to Long Island for, like, an Islanders game, but it was so far out there where we're like, there's no way we can do this.
Yeah, just to, like, drive by. Because, I mean, it's not like you could, like, go in or anything. Because, obviously, it's privately owned and everything. But, yeah, I mean, the fact that no one else has experienced anything weird in there. The fact that the lawyer did come out and say that it was all a hoax. I don't know. I really think that it started as a hoax and that they honestly believed it themselves.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't think it's a situation of, like, they continue to lie. I think it's that they created this situation and they convinced themselves that it was true. Whether they did experience some weird things that they attributed to the spirits, or whether they made up everything but then continued to convince themselves that that is what actually happened. Which, I mean, I don't know. It's very odd that he would immediately, like, seek out a book deal, like, right after your family supposedly experienced this horrible ordeal. You just abandoned this house that you just bought with your new wife and, like, all of your belongings, and you're like, somebody should write a book about this. Like, that's kind of an odd reaction.
Yeah, that's the thing, too. Like, you see your wife and children levitating above their beds and, like, knives being thrown. Like, you see all this, like, and your first thought is not, it's like, maybe I should write a book. And then you're later, like, suing your former stepson over
trademark issue. Yeah.
Trademark stuff. It seems a bit like they're wanting some money.
And especially with Christopher saying that, like, no, George, like, tried to draw out these spirits. Again, whether or not he actually drew out any spirits, it wasn't like this just happened to, like, oh, we just bought this house and moved in and it just happened. It was like, oh, maybe I can try to get these spirits to come out. So that kind of leads to the thinking of whether or not you intentionally made this happen or whether you created all of this in your brain. You had the thoughts about the spirits before the spirits actually did anything to you, you know?
Yeah, and I would like to know maybe if, like, George or Kathy ever went, like, a psychiatric evaluation either. You know, maybe if... Because the kids, I could understand if they're young and you're being told this, like, you're going to believe it. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, every kid believes in Santa Claus. I mean, obviously, it's not the same thing. But, you know, as a kid, you're going to believe what your parents tell you. But I'm wondering, like, did they just, like, come up with this and then, like, believe it? Or is he, like, maybe, like, having, like, some kind of psychotic break where he's seeing this stuff? You know what I mean? Like, something happening. I don't know.
I mean, because it does majority... I mean, Kathy reports it too, but most of the things seem to be from George. So did he... Like you said, is he having a psychotic break and he's actually seeing these things and he's convinced that that it's these spirits, and then he's able to convince the rest of the family that weird things that they are hearing, experiencing, whatever, are related to the spirits. I mean, like, one of them are, like, strange odors. Okay. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah.
Like...
I smell strange odors in my house all
exactly. The time. And, like, slime coming out of the walls. Is it slime? Do you have mold? I mean, you know, there's just so many, like,
Yeah, and, like, he saw them levitating in their beds. And, like, if I woke up and Kevin was like, I saw you levitating in your bed, I'm going to believe him because Kevin is, like, the biggest skeptic in the world. I'd be like, okay, yeah. I believe you. You know, like, I don't know. It's just odd.
Yeah, it is a very odd situation. But let us know what you guys think. Do you think there's any truth to it? Do you think that it was completely made up and they lied their whole lives? Did they convince themselves it was true? Did it actually happen? Let us know your thoughts. But I mean, the original murder story of Ronald DeFeo murdering his whole family is just so tragic and just so sad.
Yeah, that is very tragic.
All right, well, we hope you guys enjoyed our little spooky Halloween episode, special edition. I don't know, whatever you guys want to call it. We hope you guys have a wonderful Halloween. And Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
Okay, I'm going to pull a Jaclyn. I'm going to have 2 perks.
I love 2 perks.
So one, as I mentioned, I'm in my new apartment. I went to sleep in my new apartment. And it kind of sucked yesterday because we were moving and it was pouring down rain. But
the worst time to move.
It's horrible. But we got everything in. It's a mess, but we're getting it organized. We're just going to take it room by room and get it done.
Yep.
But I'm just so excited to be here. And, like, we got pizza for everyone yesterday, and it was, like, literally less than a 5-minute walk and picked up pizza. And
That's awesome.
It's so nice. I'm so excited. And then part 2 of my perk is last week I ended up having some engagement photos done.
Oh, yes.
And Tiffany was so sweet and rented out the marquee on a Bijou Theater, which is like a local historic kind of theater in Knoxville. And so it said, like, Kevin and Courtney, like, March 26, 2022, because that's our date. And everyone loves a good Kevin story. We all love a good Kevin story, right? So basically, like, we all met up, and then Tiffany was driving us because we wanted to hit a few places downtown. So we're driving down Gay Street, and she said later in her head, like, oh crap, we're gonna pass the Bijou. But I was kind of turned, so I didn't see it. And Kevin's like, oh my god, did you see that? It said, like, Kevin and Courtney, like, March 20, and, like, he's, like, reading it out, like, really not understanding. And Tiffany was like, damn it. And he said not until Tiffany said, like, damn it, did he realize it was for us. Like, he just thought it was, like, what are the odds?
It's like, what a crazy coincidence. Like, another Courtney and Kevin are getting married in March? Like, what?
Yeah, so it didn't register for him. But I'm really excited. We got some pretty good pictures.
They turned out so good.
I'm really excited to see them all, and I'm just so happy. And maybe I'll post a picture of one of them if you guys want to see that. I don't know.
Yeah, let us know if you guys want to see it.
I don't know. We'll see. But now that I have taken 2 perks, Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week, which next week might no longer be the perk of the week, but we put an offer on a house yesterday, so that is super exciting and also kind of terrifying. And but yeah, so we will know tomorrow whether or not they accepted the offer. So next week we may be back to looking at houses again. But for right now, I'm gonna hold on to some hope.
Be optimistic. Yeah, put it out there.
Yep. So that is my perk of the week.
Yeah, house hunting sounds fun.
It is fun.
I'm not anywhere near house hunting, but hopefully they'll accept, or hopefully you'll find the next house that's perfect.
Yes, I hope so. It's very nice, and it has this beautiful outdoor space. Like, I love to be outdoors, and it has this little screened-in patio, and it's got, like, raised, like, beds for, like, Andrew's vegetable garden, like, already ready to go, and so it's just very nice. So hopefully next week that'll be my next perk of the week, that they accepted the offer. So stay tuned, even though by the time you guys hear
Fingers
this,
crossed.
we will have already had a decision by several weeks. But anyway.
Fingers crossed. We're just we're living in the past future a bit, I guess. We'll see.
Anyway.
So congrats to Chris, who's our winner of the Instagram giveaway. It is officially over.
Yes.
Chris won. He chose Duncan. Solid choice, Chris. So he got that. But if you're sad, don't worry. We still have our Apple Podcast Reviews giveaway going.
Yes.
You can still get a $10 gift card. You can still get a pin and a sticker. So don't worry, you can still do it. Just go ahead and review. Just be sure to like put your name or put something, or send us a message like before you submit the review of a picture of it, so we know for sure that you actually submitted a review. And once we get to 50, which we're not very close, so tell your friends. Once we get to 50, we will draw another name, and you can still get one. So don't be sad yet.
Yes, there are more opportunities to win, and maybe we'll do another giveaway soon because we love you guys and we like giving you guys things.
For sure.
But either way, make sure you go follow us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod. You can follow us on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast, on Twitter at Caff Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod, or if you just want to send us an old-fashioned email, you can do so at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. And those are all the ways to find us, so do one or all of them.
Yeah, and if you're like, you know what, I need more content, I want a pin and sticker without having to wait, you can come support us at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
Yes.
We have a lot of good little bonus goodies. Even at the smallest tier, you get all our bonus episodes. In the higher tiers, you get more things like a Q&A, Google Hangout, the pin and sticker, etc., etc. So just come take a view at it. See if maybe that's something you want, even for just a month or two. We'd love to have you over there.
Yes, absolutely.
So until then, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.